The world stood still on August 28th, 2020. I remember exactly where I was when that notification popped up, and I bet you do too. It felt like a punch to the gut. Our king, the man who brought T'Challa to life with such grace, was gone at the age of 43. It didn't make any sense. We'd just seen him in movies, still commanding the screen with truly incredible signature intensity. How could the King of Wakanda simply pass away in silence? The shockwave was global, leaving millions in a state of absolute disbelief and utter shock. But as the dust settled, a much more heartbreaking story began to emerge from behind the curtain of Hollywood glamour. You see, while we were all cheering for him, Chadwick Boseman was fighting a war none of us knew about for 4 long years. He battled colon cancer, moving from stage 3 to stage 4, while filming some of the biggest blockbusters in history. Can you even imagine the strength that took? He was undergoing surgeries and chemotherapy between takes on movie sets like Marshall and Daw 5 Bloods. Why did he keep it a secret? Rumors suggest he didn't want the illness to define him or have pity cloud his art. He wanted to be a hero on his own terms. Only a tiny inner circle guarded his privacy like a fortress. At the heart of that circle was the woman behind the king, Simone Ledward Boseman. For years, they kept their relationship away from the prying and intrusive eyes of the paparazzi. They were the ultimate low-profile couple. But here is the part that will pull at your heartstrings. They actually got married in secret just precious months before he finally passed away. What was supposed to be the start of their forever turned into a devastating goodbye. Suddenly, Simone was thrust into the spotlight as the face of a mourning family, carrying a burden of grief we could only glimpse from a distance. Before we continue this journey, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We love seeing how far Chadwick's powerful legacy reaches across the globe. Now, as if the emotional weight wasn't enough, the immediate aftermath brought a massive complication no one expected. Despite being one of the highest paid actors at the peak of his career, Chadwick Boseman died without a will. It sounds crazy, right? Why would a superstar with so much at stake leave no written instructions for his estate? Dying intestate is basically a recipe for a legal headache. It left his fortune in limbo, forcing the court system to decide how everything would be handled. Back in his hometown of Anderson, South Carolina, his parents, Leroy and Carolyn Boseman, were dealing with a loss no parent should ever face. They are a tight-knit family, and seeing their son become a global icon was a source of immense pride. But now, that pride was replaced by an agonizing reality. While the world held candlelight vigils and posted tributes, Leroy and Carolyn were mourning their boy in private. The contrast was jarring. On one side, you had the public celebration of a legend, and on the other, the silent void left in a family home. As the weeks turned into months, the focus shifted from the silver screen to the courthouse. When there's no will, things get complicated fast, especially when millions of dollars and a legacy are on the line. People started asking the tough questions. Who gets the house? Who controls the rights to his image? The stage was being set for a legal drama that would test the bonds of the Boseman family and reveal how complicated life gets when a hero falls without a plan. You won't believe how much of his fortune was actually left after the lawyers and the government took their massive cut. But to understand that, we have to look at the cold, hard numbers. When those court filings finally hit the public record, everyone's jaw collectively dropped. We're talking about a man who led a billion-dollar franchise, yet his estate was valued at just around $2.3 million. Only $2 million. I know what you're thinking because I thought the exact same thing. How is it possible that the King of Wakanda had a bank balance that seemed so, well, modest for a Hollywood titan? This is where the mystery really starts to deepen, and it's a perfect example of why Hollywood finances are never as simple as they look on a red carpet. You see, that $2.3 million wasn't his entire life's work. It was just the amount that had to go through the public probate process because he didn't have a will. Most of his actual wealth was likely tucked away in private trusts, safe from public eyes, but that didn't stop the internet from going into a frenzy trying to figure out where the rest of the Black Panther money went. With no will to guide the way, Simone Ledward Boseman had to step into a role she probably never imagined, the administrator of the estate. Can you imagine? You're grieving the love of your life, and suddenly you're in a Los Angeles courtroom filing petitions just to handle his final affairs. This is where things could have turned really ugly. Usually, when this much money and fame are involved, you see families tearing each other apart in the tabloids. We've seen it with Prince. We've seen it with Aretha Franklin. It usually becomes a complete circus. Rumors started swirling almost immediately. The internet whispers were loud, with people speculating that there was a massive rift between Simone and Chadwick's parents, Leroy and Carolyn Boseman. Headlines were screaming about a family feud over those valuable residuals. But was there actually any truth to that? Well, when you dig into the legal documents, a different story emerges. It wasn't about greed. It was about the cold reality of the probate process draining the inheritance. Every month the case stayed open, the lawyers were getting paid, and the court fees were stacking up. By the time they reached the finish line, the estate had been hit by a massive tax bill and significant legal costs. In fact, one of the filings even included a specific request for Simone to be reimbursed for the funeral costs she paid out of her own pocket. Think about that for a second. The man was a global icon, yet his widow had to ask the court for permission to get her money back for his burial. It's heartbreaking, right? Despite all the gossip about a fight, Simone, Leroy, and Carolyn eventually showed the world what true class looks like. Instead of a multi-year courtroom battle, they reached a quiet, respectful agreement. They decided to split the remaining assets 50-50. Half went to Simone as his widow, and the other half went to his parents. It was a smooth resolution that honestly surprised a lot of people who were expecting a drama-filled showdown. They chose peace over a public spectacle, proving that the bond Chadwick built with his family was stronger than any paycheck. But there's still that lingering question about the big studios. Did Marvel or Disney step up? There's been a ton of speculation about whether there were insurance payouts or special contract clauses that kicked in after his passing. Some say the studio provided extra support to the family behind the scenes, while others wonder if his contract residuals are still being tallied up as the movies continue to stream. While the official court filings give us the numbers, they don't tell the whole story of the behind-the-scenes negotiations. One thing is for sure, the money was only half the story. The real battle wasn't just about the bank accounts, it was about who would protect his name and ensure that the Boseman brand stayed as untarnished as the vibranium suit he wore, because as we're about to see, the fight for his legacy was just getting started, and it was about to move from the courtroom to the biggest stages in the world. When the news of the 50-50 estate split finally broke, fans across social media were absolutely torn. You know how it goes on the internet. Everyone has a passionate opinion on everything. Some people were baffled, asking how a superstar like the King of Wakanda could leave such a complex situation behind without a simple will. On Twitter and TikTok, the debates were endless. Some fans were fiercely protective of Simone Ledward Boseman, arguing that as his wife, she deserved every penny for the years she spent by his side during his darkest hours. Others were worried about his parents, Leroy and Carolyn Boseman, wondering if the legal process was leaving them out in the cold. But honestly, beneath all the noise, there was a shared sense of heartbreak. The community wasn't really fighting about the money, they were grieving the man. The transition for Simone was nothing short of heroic. Imagine going from being a private partner to the public face of a global tragedy practically overnight. She didn't just hide away though, instead she became the guardian of his legacy. Do you remember those emotional speeches at the Golden Globes and the Academy Awards? There wasn't a dry eye in the house when she stood on those stages, her voice trembling but her spirit strong. She wasn't just accepting awards for his incredible performance in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. She was speaking for a man who had used his final breaths to give us his best work. It was clear to everyone watching that Simone wasn't just a grieving widow, she was on a profound mission to ensure that Chadwick's name stayed synonymous with excellence and dignity. But she didn't stop at award shows. To truly honor Chadwick's deep love for his alma mater, the family worked closely with Netflix to establish the Chadwick A. Boseman Memorial Scholarship at Howard University. We are talking about a $5.4 million endowment. This wasn't just a gesture, it was a life-changing investment in future students who share Chadwick's passion for the arts. It's so inspiring to see how they turned the estate's resources into a beacon of hope for young Black creators. It really shows that even without a will, the family knew exactly what Chadwick would have wanted: to give back to the place that helped shape him into the legend he became. Then, the world held its breath for Black Panther, Wakanda forever. Could the franchise even continue without its king? Rumors were flying about how the family felt, but the reality was deeply moving. Simone and the Boseman family were reportedly very supportive of the sequel, seeing it as a collective way for the cast, the crew, and the fans to say goodbye. The film wasn't just a superhero movie anymore, it was a 2-hour tribute to a brother and a friend. While it must have been incredibly difficult for Leroy and Carolyn to see their son's face on giant billboards again, the outpouring of love from the global community seemed to provide a much-needed sense of comfort. So where are they now? Leroy and Carolyn Boseman are back in the quiet, familiar surroundings of Anderson, South Carolina, living a life far away from the glitz and glamour of Los Angeles. They've remained a pillar of strength and grace throughout this entire ordeal. Simone, on the other hand, continues to be a force in the arts, making sure that her husband's impact is felt in everything she does. She's proving that moving forward doesn't mean moving on. Her life is still beautifully centered around his memory, but she's also carving out her own path as a leader in the creative community. This journey is a powerful lesson for everyone. Even legends need a plan to protect their loved ones. Chadwick showed us how to lead, and his family showed us how to heal. They turned a legal situation into a story of unity, keeping the king's light burning forever. How would you handle such a legacy? Share below.